Back at the high school, Manabu scolds Toshiro for getting into fights oftenly, and he starts to cling to Regis, making Toshiro believe that he had something for men instead of women. At Manabu's home, Manabu, being a computer geek, is tasked by his uncle, who is in the police, to carry out security checks on the police department server. During the security check, Manabu encounters Tao of the DA5, who was trying to hack into the police department server. They both gradually started to gain respect for each other since they hadn't found anyone as nerdy as they were, and they continued to outdo each other by sending attacks over the server back and forth. During the intense battle, brainless Toshiro spoils the fun as he accidentally trips on the laptop battery cord, causing Manabu's laptop to shut down. Manabu scolds Toshiro for not using his brain and leaves the room to report the server attack to his uncle. With Manabu out of the room, Toshiro takes control of Manabu's laptop and begins to read Manabu's chats. Tao, impressed with Manabu's skills, begins to chat with Manabu, not knowing that now Toshiro was behind the laptop. Toshiro begins to feel suspicious as Tao reveals he is a 24-year-old man, making Toshiro believe even more that Manabu was into guys, and even old ones on that. As Toshiro was busy chatting, Manabu creeps up on Toshiro with a godlike coldness in his eyes, which makes Toshiro gulp in fear as he begs for mercy. Meanwhile, Tao, after feeling that Manabu was being unresponsive, reports to Kranz, the leader of the DA5, about M21's whereabouts, as Tao was able to spot him through hacking the city cameras. After hearing the report, Kranz orders Hammer and Shark to apprehend M21 using any techniques they could in order to apprehend him alive. Meanwhile, at Frank's house, M21 and Regis continued to argue with each other, and finally, after a while, as M21 was about to open up about his past to Regis, M21 is interrupted by Frank, who finally loses his cool as he orders Regis and M21 to clean up all the wrappers they had thrown onto the floor. Regis, being the annoying brat he is, orders Frank to make Rai also participate in cleaning the floor. Frank, hesitant to ask his master to clean, begins to divert the conversation onto Sarah, but Regis again brings the topic back onto Rai. Annoyed with Regis's squealing, Rai, with zero expression, stands up and begins to help Regis clean up the mess. The next day, Frank gives a fake bank account to M21 that couldn't be traced by the union and deposits his first salary on the bank account. The following day, on his way to someplace, M21 encounters Shark and Hammer, who immediately start off on bad terms. Shortly after, a battle ensues which ends up totally one-sided, as Shark is easily able to outskill M21. After a while, the fight is interrupted with Regis and Sarah stumbling upon M21 totally injured. Provoked by Regis bad-mouthing him, Shark unleashes a strong attack towards Regis, which is blocked by M21, who stands in front of Regis and absorbs the attack. Shortly after, Kranz jumps in and scolds Shark for going overboard on M21, even though he had instructed him to bring him alive. To protect Regis and Sarah and to also find out about his previous comrades, M21 agrees to come along with the DA5, as he acted to be a part of the union since the DA5 still believed him to be a union agent. Regis also buys into M21's act of a union agent and feels furious as he feels betrayed by him. Meanwhile, Manabu once again gets to security check police servers, and this time returns prepared to counter Tao's breach on the police server. As expected, Tao once again appears and he sends a barrage of viruses to Tao's device, taking him by surprise. Tao, impressed by Manabu's attack, traces Manabu's data and finds his whereabouts, and decides to pay him a visit sometime soon to befriend him. Back to Regis. Reaching Frank's mansion, Regis and Sarah inform Frank of M21's betrayal, making Frank worried that M21 would leak Rai's information to the Union after joining them. Somewhere secluded, the DA5 members detain and torture M21 in an attempt to pry out information about his mission regarding the retrieval of the casket, and also about Jake and Marie. Since M21 wasn't budging, the DA5 decide to leave him for the time being and give him some time to think. Before leaving, Takeo sympathizes with M21's condition and offers him water, which surprises M21 and the other DA5 members. After drinking the water, M21, using the DA5's false knowledge of him still being a union agent, agrees to cooperate, and he only promises to reveal information on the condition that the DA5 members reveal to him about the data on his fellow failed experiments like himself. After accepting his deal, M21 takes further advantage of being the only lead to their case and bargains for food. Kranz asks Hammer to share his greasy knockoff McDonald's broast, but M21 demands them for a bowl of ramen instead. Taking a break, Tao commends Takeo's humane ways of doing things in his group, as he was the only one who sympathized with M21. But Takeo informs his kind nature being a result of his memories with his sister. At school, Manabu wonders about M21's sudden disappearance and asks Regis about M21. Seeing that Regis was mad for some reason, Manabu plans to have a party at Frank's mansion. Shortly after, Manabu receives a text from Tao asking for a physical meetup tomorrow, so the next day, he leaves Toshiro alone with Sarah to buy party items. items. The next day, as Toshiro is carrying the party items, he notices Takeo getting beaten up in an alleyway and springs into action to beat up the bullies. Somewhere else, Manabu meets up with Tao and is initially on guard as Tao was an outlaw hacker who had hacked the police department. But soon they geek out over their shared interest in hacking. Manabu finds that he and Tao are a lot alike as they are surrounded by people that do not understand their similar hobby. As a sign of respect, Manabu calls Tao his older brother, which makes Tao happy. After rescuing him from the alleyway, Takeo thanks Toshiro for helping him and mistakes Sarah and him for a couple. Rushing to reach the mansion in time for the party, Toshiro and Sarah part ways with Takeo, who was reminded of his younger sister who was also their age. Later, to understand what it means to be an older brother, Tao offers Takeo a hand in searching for his sister who was detained by the Union. After the long break, Shark threatens to kill M21 if he remains silent during the interrogation once again, but Takeo reminds Shark that M21 was their only source of info. Chastising his forgiving nature, Shark reveals that he had killed all of the women and children that Takeo had spared in the previous missions. Hearing this, Takeo is enraged and points his gun at Shark, but Tao stops him. Shark asks him to discard his pity as the organization had a rule to kill any possible leakers. Later that day, at the high school, Regis notices Shark who was watching him from afar. Shark, realizing that Regis had previously seen him, decides to use him as a pawn to pry out information from M21. Later, Regis meets up with Shark and Hammer and a battle ensues. Regis easily proceeds to outclass Shark, so Hammer throws out bombs to protect Shark. He then tosses Shark a pill called D, which turns Shark more stronger than before. Able to keep up with him now, Regis decides to use his powers at full potential and impales Shark. Before landing a finishing blow on Shark, Regis stops as Hammer threatens to kill Manabu and Toshiro if he does not oblige with their orders. Back at the base, Shark meets up with the other DA5 members and M21 and reveals his new captives. At Frank's mansion, Sarah takes her leave in a hurry after she sensed her mental connection with Regis was destroyed, meaning that Regis was either unconscious or dead. Believing that Manabu and Toshiro were also in danger, Rai and Frank follow after Sarah. Unconscious Regis finally awakens to find himself in strong handcuffs and surrounded by DA5 members. Believing that Regis knew about the casket, Shark tries to pry his relation with M21. To save Regis, M21 lies about Regis's relation with him. Toshiro and Manabu also awaken and realize that they had met some of the members previously. Toshiro is surprised to see Takeo, whereas Tao is ridiculed by Shark after Manabu calls Tao his older brother. However, neither of them expected to find their school guard, M21, among the members. M21 ignores Manabu's cries for an explanation, so Shark tests M21's conviction by threatening to beat up Toshiro to death. Before anything could go down, Tao intervenes and Takeo suggests that they let the new captives go after they use a memory-erasing drug. However, Kran supports Shark's decision to kill them as any potential risks were not acceptable. As Shark advances to impale Manabu, Toshiro tries to slow Shark down. Seeing that M21's humanity was far gone, Regis takes matters in his own hands and protects Manabu. Shark then strikes Regis to the ground and then lifts him up to land a barrage of punches on his face. To protect Regis, Toshiro rushes to punch Shark. Meanwhile, returning with the whole KFC menu, Hammer finds Sarah on his way back to the interrogation room. Hammer throws bombs at her, but Sarah cuts his body. He then throws another set of bombs, but Sarah makes quick work of him. Receiving the punch, Shark lets go of Regis so he could deal with Toshiro. Takeo protests against Shark's actions, but Kran sends Takeo away to investigate the bombings in the above floors of the building. M21 tries to set Toshiro and the other students free by agreeing to reveal information, but Kranz refuses to leave witnesses behind. Shark then lifts Toshiro by the neck so he could choke him to death as M21 begins to question his decisions. M21 was very close to fulfilling his promise with M24 by finding other failed experiments, but now he was in a dilemma. Manabu rushes to help but is hurled away by Shark. Realizing that he was discarding his morality, M21 makes the decision to help Toshiro by clawing away at Shark's arm. At the roof of the building, Rai and Frank land only to find Takeo in front of them. Frank suggests Rai to help his friends while he deals with Takeo. Frank charges at Takeo, who blocks the attack using a black box. Takeo then begins shooting Frank using a huge rifle. Frank dodges the shots and gets close range, only to realize that Takeo also had a pistol at his disposal. Frank saves himself in time, so Takeo decides to use the D-pill to speed things up. On another floor, Sarah once again finds Hammer, who had survived the previous attack and was now under the influence of the D-pill. Meanwhile, M21 continues charging against Shark, who then pushes him away. To protect the students, M21 comes in front of Shark's attack, making him fall to the ground. Realizing that M21 was now on his side, Regis breaks his handcuffs and throws Shark away. Shark then uses the D pill to power up, but Regis is still able to corner him. Before Regis could behead him, Kranz saves Shark and uses the D pill himself. Mistaken that Kranz was trying to help him, Shark is shocked to find himself impaled by Kranz, who reveals his motive of absorbing the other members using the pill. After reducing Shark to skin and bones, Kranz throws Shark away and easily counters all advances from Regis. He then punches Regis, but decides to spare him as Regis had information on the casket. Seeing Regis's state, M21 tries to help, but bleeds due to the cut from earlier. With less to no hope, M21 finds Rai nearby, making his way inside the room, with his target, Kranz, in sight. Rai is pissed off, and gets offended after Kranz speaks without permission in his presence. He forces Kranz to the ground using mind control. Meanwhile, Takeo places his pistol point blank at Frank. Takeo tries to finish Frank quickly as he needs to deal with Rai next. Hearing this, Frank unleashes his sealed powers to protect his master. At the same time, Sarah summons her soul weapon, which was known as the Death Scythe. She decapitates Hammer and heads out, only to see a flashy battle taking place on the roof. At the roof, Takeo tries to evade Frank's spikes, but is eventually caught. As Takeo was preparing to accept his sealed fate, a glimmer of his sister's face forced him to struggle for survival. Takeo then leaps and fires a shot at Frank, which nearly hits Frank's face. Takeo rushes behind Frank, but Frank is able to immobilize him. Takeo falls to the ground, and Frank advances to finish him off. However, Sarah reaches the rooftop and realizes that Frank was no ordinary human and was only acting as one. Likewise, Frank realizes that Sarah is a noble clan leader due to her possessing a soul weapon. Recognizing Sarah from before, Takeo asks Sarah to protect Toshiro as he had saved him in the alleyway previously. Frank spares Takeo, instructing him to apologize to Toshiro after they clear up the interrogation room. Back in the interrogation room, Kranz resists the mind control imposed by Rai and tries to slash him. Rai stops his attack single-handedly and blasts him away to the wall. Kranz sends many slashes towards Rai, who deflects it using his barrier. Desperate, Kranz orders Tao to consume the D-pill, so Tao obliges and heads towards Kranz against Manabu's protests. Kranz lifts him by the neck and demands him to hurry, but is taken off guard as Tao leaps away from his grip and shocks him with a taser. Angered by his betrayal, Kranz charges to finish off Tao. However, Rai paralyzes Kranz with his power, allowing Tao to escape. Hearing Manabu's pleas, Rai heads towards Manabu, reminding him that he would protect them regardless because they are friends. Rai then breaks into a Hitler salute, allowing him to manipulate blood. Regis recognizes this ability to be blood-fueled, which makes him astounded by Rai's sheer power. Rai finds it fitting to eradicate Kranz by his own blood spilled from the battle. Unable to keep up, Kranz is erased from existence, concluding the fight once and for all. The next day, at Frank's mansion, Takeo awakens from his unconsciousness, only to find M21 in bandages next to him. In another room, Frank notices Rai coughing blood due to the exertion from the previous battle. Before he could help Rai, Rai tells him to not worry about him and he should really be ashamed of being selfish and breaking his seal without permission. Reminded of breaking his seal, Frank apologizes to Rai as he had sealed Frank's powers previously, and he was not to use his sealed powers without Rai's consent. Frank, prepared to take on any punishments from Rai, was surprised as Rai dropped all punishments as he trusted that Frank was wise in his decisions and would not disobey Rai unreasonably. Hungry, Rai and Frank head to the dinner table where Tao is impressed by Sarah's cooking skills, but is even more amazed by Frank's signature ramen dish. At the mansion's balcony, M21 regrets failing to get intel on his fellow failed experiments, and starts blaming his failure on his weakness. However, Rai informs M21 that he had more potential, and proceeds to show him his powerful true form. Overwhelmed by his own powers, M21 vows to get stronger. In another room, Tao and Takeo decide to hide from the Union by hacking its server and listing themselves as dead. Worried about his sister, Takeo gets the shock of his life after Tao informs him that his sister did not exist, and his memories with her fabricated by the Union. Feeling like a burden to Frank, Tao decides to leave with Takeo the next day. As they are leaving, Tao also informs M21 that he attempted to extract info about other failed experiments, but all records were already destroyed. M21, feeling that the Union will continue to track them down, begs Frank to lend them a place in the mansion. Upon Rai's agreement, Frank lets Takeo and Tao also stay at the mansion, making it more of a shelter than a mansion now. The next day, Toshiro and Manabu decide to continue their high school after a long break and find themselves with an even bigger flock of perverted girls since the handsome trio of two newly assigned guards, consisting of Tao and Takeo along with M21, had all the girls drooling. Moreover, all of the girls go crazy when the Riz Lord himself, Rai, makes his entry, which causes Toshiro to get depressed since he had zero luck with getting a waifu. During lunch break, since Toshiro was gloomy about his unfair life without girls, Manabu asks Rai for help since he was the charm of the high school. Rai only stutters a word, which causes all the girls around him to go faint, which backfires since Toshiro gets even more annoyed and desperate. To help Toshiro's dire situation, Manabu asks which girl he had a crush on, and it unfortunately turns out to be Sarah, the only girl which was as beautiful and as emotionless as Rai. With a code red-like situation in hand, Manabu gathers Takeo, Tao, M21 and Rai to somewhere secluded. To get help with Toshiro's love life, Manabu begs them to help Toshiro since they all had huge success with girls, and he reveals that Toshiro was going straight for the big fish, Sarah. Knowing that getting Toshiro with Sarah was straight up mission impossible, Tao, Takeo and M21 try to excuse themselves out of the spot, but they are forced to help since Rai asks them to help him out. After a lot of tries, Toshiro is unable to synergize with Tao, Takeo and M21 and helplessly decides to visit Frank. At the headmaster room, Toshiro asks Frank if he ever had problems with girls, and to Toshiro's surprise, Frank replies with yes. As Frank begins to tell his story, Toshiro quickly realizes that Frank did have trouble with girls, but it was trouble involving getting rid of girls chasing him around every time since he was handsome AF. With a few people to get help from, Toshiro decides to meet up with Regis since he was the only one who used to hang around Sarah all the time. Since Regis and Sarah were on formal terms, Regis isn't able to help Toshiro, which follows up with M21 calling Regis useless since he wasn't helpful. Regis and M21 quickly get into an argument like always, and as a result, Regis decides to not help Toshiro. Before Regis was about to leave, Rai appears behind Regis and orders him to help Toshiro. After a while, at the library, Regis, Tao, Takeo and M21 help Toshiro write a love letter, but it is all in vain since Toshiro is unable to write a letter without being too formal or too weird. Toshiro, annoyed, discards the paper he was writing on and throws it away, which coincidentally lands near Rai's shoe. In an attempt to impress Sarah, Toshiro formulates a plan to impress Sarah by showing off his basketball skills to her. To help Toshiro look cool, Tao, Takeo, M21 and Regis agree to play like noobs and let Toshiro take the crown. As the basketball match begins, Rai coincidentally gets control of the ball, and since Rai had a powerful aura emanating from him, nobody dared to get close. Since Rai, alien to basketball rules, started to travel with ball in hand, he is forced to give away the possession of the ball because of the traveling rule. The game is started once again, and the ball once again coincidentally directs towards Rai, who this time gracefully dodges the ball and lets it get in the possession of the opposing team. Regis, now with the ball in hand, gets selfish as he strays away from the plan and gets into a rivalry with M21. M21 and Regis start to play against each other as they try to outdo each other by getting more hoops than the other. After a while, the ball directs towards Rai and he gets possession of the ball once again. To help Toshiro, Rai passes the ball to Toshiro at full speed and he makes the ball go through M21's block, so that Toshiro could gain control of the ball. With the only chance in proving himself cool to girls present at the court, Toshiro jumps up to slam dunk the ball, but his one and only chance is ruined by Takeo, who also forgets his motive and proceeds to snatch the ball and score a hoop himself, causing the girls to fall for him instead. Hopeless, Toshiro and Manabu sit outside at a bench where Toshiro decides to stop chasing after Sarah as he felt that Sarah had no feelings for him. Shortly after, Sarah and Regis approach them from behind where Sarah reveals the love letter Toshiro had discarded before. Toshiro, feeling all embarrassed, asks if she had read through the love letter. Sarah, after confirming that she had read through the letter, tells Toshiro to be himself since he is much charming when he is truer to himself and others. Since they were headed to Frank's house, Sarah hands over Toshiro's bag to him and smiles for the very first time as they all together headed towards Frank's mansion. After reaching the mansion, Manabu and Toshiro find everyone sitting down formally as they all were waiting for the two of them to arrive. Upon arriving, Frank reveals that Rai was going to rewrite their memories of them since they knew who nobles and superhumans were. Manabu and Toshiro break down as they protest, but they finally agree after Frank reveals that rewriting their memories was necessary for their own safety since the secret of nobles and superhumans was to remain secret. Rai, reassuring that Manabu and Toshiro wouldn't lose their feelings and relation with them, rewrites their memories by making them forget about them being nobles and superhumans. The next day, Jejuval K. Landigger, the noble clan leader of the Landigger clan, pays a visit to the academy. All the nobles in the academy sense Jejuval's presence and Regis and Sarabo while greeting him as Regis belonged to the Landigger clan. Jejuval questions Regis's duties as he was apparently wasting his time mingling with modified humans. Before Regis could answer, their conversation is cut short as Frank, having history with Jejuval, greets him at the gate and invites him to his mansion.